loss that was declined by the underlying carrier, it's not going to be covered by the umbrella. In other words, if something happens, it has to be covered by the underlying policy, and if it is, then it's automatically accepted by the umbrella. It follows form. Yes.
What if the underlying policy is outside the U.S.?
You know what, that would be a tough one. Because usually, for insurance purposes, they only cover within the United States. So, I don't know of a carrier that would do, I'd have to, that would be something I would have to look and shop for, to find that carrier. I don't know if Lloyd's would do something like that, but that would be a unique situation that would require research and looking at different options.
Excuse me, before you go on, back on the landlord slide, you had a bullet, ways to save costs and yet have good coverage. Did you address that?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't. You know, some of the ways is to have a higher deductible, so that you're taking on a little bit more of that risk if you want to keep the costs down. Some people do look at doing the dwelling ones, you know, depending on where they live. They might think about the dwelling ones and doing those coverages individually. So those are a couple of ways you can look at those options.
Mm-hmm. Question, do you do E&O insurance for non-professionals, and you do E&O insurance for professionals?
I do E&O insurance. The non-professionals, it would depend on the category. Again, I would have to look at the market.
Well, like here, say a person rents their own home, not their own home, but their own piece of property.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a non-professional doing that, and then there are professionals, licensed people that do it for a living. Do you carry both types of policies?
I think that we would have a hard time finding the carrier for the individual. They're going to be covered for most things as the owner of the property under their liability policy. So they may not really need it because most everything they'll do, they'll be covered as an owner. When you have a real estate professional, they're not the owners of the property and they're acting on behalf of somebody else, and they have a fiduciary responsibility for that somebody else, and therefore E&O would apply. And the only reason I'm saying that is I had a situation where somebody was the manager of an estate, but he was also one of the beneficiaries of the estate, and they would not give him he wanted professional liability as the estate manager, and they would not give it to him because he was actually a recipient of the estate as well. So if you have a vested interest in it, they typically do not want to give you that coverage. So again, it would have to be something I'd look at. I can't say it doesn't exist out there, but it would be trying to find that policy in that carrier.
So what is E&O?
So you offer
Errors and omissions.
Oh.
So for instance, an insurance agent would have that, a real estate agent would have errors and omissions, lawyers, accountants, and then you have certain computer professionals also that have professional liability. So,
What I was going to suggest also, when you were saying another way to save, which is what I do, I get the ACV, I get an actual cash value as
Right.
opposed to the replacement
Right.
cost. So
Thank
if you
you.
buy a house for, say, in my area is for $40,000, I might insure it for $50,000 for actual cash value as replacement, which will cost me about, say, $440. But replacement for that same thing might cost me $780.
and
But if I add up, if I mark it up by $10,000, so when something does happen, they mark it, they adjust it from the higher value, then you should probably get back what you initially paid anyway for some replacement.
And again, the DP1 is actual cash value.
Right.
The DP1 versus the DP3, which has the
only.
so they do have those distinguishing factors. So okay. So we did talk about an umbrella, but the one thing I did want to point out to you is that you can get a personal umbrella up to $5 million. And that's the maximum you can go on a personal umbrella, is $5 million.
Is there a limit of what's the number of properties I can put under an umbrella?
Okay, Okay, so it depends on the carrier. So you have some carriers that say you can only have 9 or 10. You have other carriers that say the maximum is 20. And then you have other carriers. I actually have an outside company that is actually pretty open. I've had as many as, gosh, what's the highest amount? I think I have 55 on one of my umbrellas, okay? Now, there are some umbrellas though, I mean, there is limits. There are limits. I mean, it's hard to find that carrier. I don't know that you could go into the hundreds, but I was able to get up to 55. But most of my customers have somewhere between anywhere from 1 to 25 is kind of the average.
How about both for umbrella and the underline, the property insurance when you use an LLC? So let's say the LLC is the owner.
Mm-hmm.
Can I still put it under my umbrella?
Mm-hmm.
And should I expect any problems with obtaining a landlord policy altogether for an LLC-owned property?
Okay, so here's what happens. The way personal insurance works, they have to name an individual because they won't necessarily pay a company. Now, you have a couple options. You can get a commercial policy. But what typically you do is you name the members of the LLC as the insurance, and you name the LLC as an additional insured on the policy. And you can also name that LLC as an additional insured on the umbrella. And so you're covering both the LLC as well as all the members in the LLC. Sure. So,
A lot of people skip that step.
okay, so typically, LLC has to consist of people, members of that LLC. So somebody has to, so you have to name that individual has to be the name. The named insured has to be a person. Okay, on a personal lines policy, it has to be a person. But you can name the LLC as an additional insured on the policy. So both that individual and the LLC is fully covered by that policy. And then you can also do the same thing on the umbrella. You can name the additional insured. Some companies will allow you to do it and some won't. But if they're named on the underlying policy, it follows form on the umbrella, so they are going to be covered on the umbrella.
Is this national policy? Does it vary from state to state?
It can vary state to state. It can vary by company, because every company has their own rules as well. So you have to work with the different company rules as well and how they want to do things. So.
You say that there's a 5 million max on the umbrella. Can you get more than one umbrella policy?
No. No, because what you can do is you can move to a commercial umbrella. You can go higher, but there's an I take that back. I misstated. You can get an umbrella on an umbrella. I know, but you can't.
It's got a wrinkle.
So, but there is a company out there, I actually just quoted one where he had a $5 million umbrella and he asked me, can I go to 6 or 7? And I called the carrier, and it was actually Hudson Insurance Company, and they said yes, and they gave us a quote for an additional $2 million to go on top of that. And he had one company for this one, and this other company was going to be on top of that. So it's an excess umbrella.
Would you say generally when you're going beyond it, you're just switching over more to a commercial based?
It's more of a commercial based umbrella. It's an excess liability policy.
Yeah, because I have one of my friends, he runs a $25 million umbrella, single umbrella.
Okay. Yeah, and you can go to a commercial umbrella. And if you have an LLC, depending on the state and where they're at, and if they're all in one location, sometimes it can actually get a little cheaper to actually have a commercial policy where the LLC is named, and you can have each home as a different location for that business. And I know that sometimes that can work out, but I think you have to have a certain number of homes to make that worthwhile, because it's typically cheaper to go with a personal lines policy.
Once you start getting into 5+ homes, you're probably not gonna wanna have a home in your name. So if you do have them in an LLC, then you're gonna end up getting a commercial policy.
can, but you can still have it, I mean, you can, the loan is in your personal name, probably, isn't it? It's probably not in the LLC's name either. So the lender's gonna want to see whoever's on the loan on that policy.
But now you've got a liability issue because you have your personal name on a policy that you're trying to accept.
But your LLC is an additional insured, and you're gonna be totally covered by it. So, because you've got that LLC in there too. So, you're gonna, by naming that LLC, you're putting them in that policy as well, to cover you. Mm-hmm.
Are farmers agents general agents, or are they locked to farmers?
Okay, so here's what it is. We're independent. We're 1099, we don't work for farmers. We have a contract with farmers. And so the way it works for me is that if it's a policy that farmers writes, I must give them first right of refusal on the business. But there's a lot of things that farmers can't do. There's different policies that they don't want to do. And in that case, I have the freedom to broker it outside and to look at other carriers that can cover them. So, and especially when it comes to commercial, or when it comes to specific umbrellas, like farmers has a limit on how many properties they'll add on the umbrella. So, there's outside carriers that I can go to for more than that.
As you're licensed, or do you have to be like a general brokerage or something?
Well, I am a broker. I am a licensed agent and broker, but most, when you get your license in California, if you have a property and casualty license, it's a license to be an agent broker. They're the same license. So, but what happens is you have to have assignments with companies, so you have to have relationships with these companies. But I personally, I have a relationship with farmers, and that's my primary carrier, and that's who I mostly quote. But I have a lot of situations, especially when it comes to commercial and the umbrella and dealing with LLCs and things, that farmers are saying, no, we don't want to do that. We're not willing to do that. And then I have the ability, I use what's called general agencies, and they don't sell to the public. They only work with licensed agents. And I work through them to find those specific policies. For instance, Farmers doesn't do E&O. They don't do E&O policies. So I always have to place those outside. That's a broker. That's something I would broker. Mm-hmm.
How would you handle a situation where you hire a contractor who's a sole proprietor, does not carry workers' comp, and makes a workers' comp claim against you, needs a contractor's contract?
Okay. So I have this question. I'm waiting for claims to actually call me back, because I have this question about it, and it's, is he licensed? Okay.
Sole proprietor, licensed.
It would be, here's what would happen. I think you could file, the claim could be filed against your home policy. I think Farmers would fight it and may decline it. But you would turn it over to your insurance company and let them handle it. But I think because he came in and he was a 1099, he's a licensed contractor, you paid him a fee, he came at his own risk. I think that they would probably fight the claim. They wouldn't automatically pay it, but I certainly think it's something that they would defend you on. Okay.
From time to time, we'll all need maintenance on the homes. So if you hire a licensed contractor, let's say to paint your house and they get injured, do you have to have insurance for that? Or should they?
They should. They should have insurance.
And the second thing, is it different if it's a rental property and not your residence, as far as insurance coverage for that?
No, it's not different. They treat it the same. But here's what I always recommend to people. If you're going to hire somebody and they're licensed, and ask them if they have insurance. If they do, ask them for an insurance certificate and ask them to name you as an additional insured. You're going to prevent them from, and I know this doesn't happen, because the question I have right now is, they got somebody off Craigslist. It's a $1,000 job to paint a couple of rooms. The guy's probably not licensed. If he gets hurt, will he be covered? And I'm waiting for claims to call me back on that. I left a voicemail today, just today, because that was one of the questions I had. Will they cover it or not cover it?
Yeah, there's a lot of casual labor that goes on. You don't go out and
Right, exactly. And you
$300
can't check
gig.
everybody.
Yeah.
And actually, a handyman does not need to be licensed. So,
Provided it's casual labor.
yeah, it's casual labor. So, you know, you have to look at those things, and that should be covered. You know, they'll at least defend you, you know.
So if a handyman gets injured, you are responsible?
No, you should not be responsible because they're an independent contractor. They're responsible for themselves.
Okay,
You don't have control over their work.
right,
You're not telling them how to do their job.
right.
So it's just like if I hire an independent contractor to come and work for me, I don't pay for workers' comp on them
Right.
because they have full control over how they operate, what equipment they use, how they use it, all of that.
Okay.
So,
Doesn't the state require that any job over $500, and don't fault me on the limit, but it's range of $500, they need to have workman's comp and they need to have evidence of a policy in place before they can do that work?
No.
not if they're the owner, not if they're the owner of the company. The owner of the company does not have to have workers' comp on themselves. Yeah. If they have workers, they are required to, but the owner of the company does not. Now, a lot of corporations will require an independent contractor who's an owner to have workers' comp. And, you know, the only company that's gonna do that is state fund. Because typically your insurance companies are not gonna write, a policy on an owner. They're not gonna include an owner on the workers' comp. So, what a lot of companies are doing, and I have this because Chevron's near where I live and I have clients that are 1099 contractors for Chevron, they have to sign a waiver saying that they understand they're an independent contractor, and if they are injured on the job, they cannot hold Chevron accountable for that. So they have to actually sign that waiver.
So you're not,
So I add that to my, when I hire someone, make sure I have a waiver.
just sign a waiver on the casual
It's
labor,
easier
is
than
probably the
anything else.
fastest
That's right,
thing,
exactly,
fastest thing to do.
yeah. Okay, so, and we're almost at the end here, so I just put this in here because when talking about insurance, you need to look at the whole spectrum of insurance, okay? Not just auto, home, like, you should think about life insurance, you should think about, and I'm not an expert in estate planning, but I do know that the laws are going to change probably next year because they only extended it 1 year. So if you have a lot of properties and your estate is very valuable, and somebody's going to inherit that, they could be paying a lot of estate taxes. And some of the ways that you can protect your family is to have life insurance to help pay for that cost. So, you know, think about having life insurance. The other thing also, make sure you have some health insurance, because if you don't, that's the major cause of bankruptcy, even more than the housing market, okay? And not having health insurance and ending up in a hospital puts you under just like that. Everything would be going fine. So, you know, as expensive and as crazy it is, if nothing else, have a hospital plan with a high deductible. So just a couple things, and then again, disability. You know, think about what is out there for you if you were to come disabled and you couldn't work. Okay. So I'm open to any other questions, and if you'd like a 15-minute consultation by phone or in person, I have business cards, you can call me, happy to do it.
Would it be a good strategy to save on insurance by actually trying to bring all my multiple properties, multiple, you know, whatever, insurable items into one carrier, or if possible to, you know, to one carrier? Would that kind of create a saving? Let's say bring both, I mean both the umbrella, and you said you don't have to have the umbrella and the underlining with the same
Right.
carrier. But if I bring the underlining to the umbrella, the same carrier, or can you suggest ways how I can save on insurance?
Okay, well, some of the
No
ways you can
driving.
save is certainly like having your auto home, your personal auto and your personal home, and even life insurance. That usually most of them offer those multi-policy discounts. The problem with a landlord policy is they view that more of a commercial, even though it's a personal lines policy. It's part of a business. It's running a business. A lot of times they don't give you those multi-policy discounts on the landlord policies. So again, but I mentioned, if you've got a lot in one state, you might look at a commercial policy, because I think somewhere around 7 or 8 houses in one state, it starts to actually get cheaper to maybe look at that. And again, it depends by state, but I know, I did an analysis for some homes in Texas, and it was actually cheaper to put it on a commercial policy than to have I think it was 10 homes, 10 individual policies. So again, you just have to look at those options. May not always work, may not always be the best, but those are ways that you can look at it. And again, if you can, I mean, think about your own personal situation. How many losses have you really had on a house? How many years have you gone without a loss? If you can save $1,000, well, not that much, but if you maybe have a deductible that's $2,500 instead of $1,000 or $500, or have a $5,000 deductible, and if you're saving $300 or $400 a year and you don't have a claim for, 10 years, you've pretty much made up your, the difference in that deductible. So, think about that sometimes too, because that can save you, and you've got multiple properties. Look at those deductibles and see, can you afford that? Is that something you can do?
Well, one of the things I see with myself, I'm guilty, but also my investors, is that we get our insurances way back when, and then we kind of sleep on it. So should I kind of have my insurance agent, or you, or myself, I'm not expert with insurance, review it, how frequently?
Well,
to make sure everything is kind of up to date.
yes. I a lot of times tell people you should look at it every year, especially when you get, but that's a little unrealistic for most people because we're busy. But I actually try to go through my portfolio, and if I haven't reviewed somebody's insurance in a while, certainly if it's been 4 or 5 years, I'm gonna call them up and say, have you thought about reviewing that? I send out letters. Danny, you should have gotten one. I send out letters every year when the renewal comes up that says, have you changed anything? Do we need to talk?
Yes, I have.
Okay? Do you, give me a call. And because we should sit down and look at those. And one of the areas that you absolutely have to look at every year is your umbrella, because those are gonna change. So you definitely, if you have an umbrella, you wanna make sure, because if you added a car, you got rid of a car, you bought a house, you didn't buy, you wanna make sure they're all in there. Or you changed the insurance company. You now need to get that new insurance company deck page to that umbrella. So any changes that you make, you really need to make sure you, especially on the umbrella, so that you can make sure that that coverage exists. Anything else? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm curious, so for us to try to plan on our insurance coverage, especially for an umbrella, we need to have some sense of what the highest claim might be. So for a rental property owner, what are some examples of some of the higher claims and the likelihood that something like that would happen? Like over $1 million? How
Well,
often does that happen?
no, they're usually not that high. It just depends on the situation. I think what you have to do is you have to look at what your assets are and make sure that you have ample coverage to cover that. Because if somebody's gonna file a claim against you, they're gonna much prefer going after an insurance company because they know that they're a deep pocket. They're not so sure that they'll ever collect from you. It's gonna be a lot harder to collect from you. So just by having that coverage, you're protecting yourself at a very cheap rate, maybe for an extra $300 a year, from having to even go through that grief.
Right, but I mean like a $5 million versus a $2 million umbrella.
Well,
when would you ever have a claim over $2 million? Does that even happen very often?
I don't think it happens very often. Most of them, I've seen outrageous dollar amounts for the smallest things, and what I think is big is, there's no way to predict that. There's no, and I actually looked for statistics, and there's really not a lot of statistics out there that kind of tell you that. So that's why I say use your assets. I need to answer this gentleman's question first. Did I answer it?
It's a totally different topic.
Uh-huh.
Earthquake insurance.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even mention
You
that.
didn't mention that.
Okay.
So, here we
Why would
are.
you mention it?
Exactly.
What's the point?
That's the other thing. Okay, so depending on where your house is, you may need to think about tornado coverage, you may need to think about hurricane coverage, or you may need to think about earthquake coverage in California. So, those are things that you should always look at and think about as far as costs. Did you have a specific question about earthquake?
Yeah. If you have a lot of property, say in California, is there any kind of like blanket earthquake insurance, anything like that at all? House by house by house?
House by house. And earthquake insurance is a 10 to 15% deductible, depending on which one you select. And so it's pretty, and depending on where the house is, it can be a very hefty premium. It can be double what your fire insurance is. So, and I know like on my house, my deductible is $65,000. So, and typically, if you're with CEA, you've got to pay that $65,000 before the policy kicks in. So, if you have a major earthquake. So again, you have to, weigh all the options there. Unfortunately, only about 4% of the population actually buys earthquake insurance in California because of the cost and the high deductibles. So we're gonna be in deep doo-doo.
Yeah.
You have cards?
I do, and I'll pass those out.
So, I noticed that all this, it's umbrella coverage and millions of dollars. Doesn't that just feed the lawyers' appetite to sue you more?
Well, they don't
It's
know.
like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, the thing is
And
they
you
don't know what
point
you
it.
have. The insurance company is not gonna tell you or tell them what you have or don't have, because we don't share information to people. We don't, we're not gonna say, oh, he has, you're welcome. And he has $1 million covered. We wouldn't do that, because guess what? We're paying it, not you. And so we're gonna try to get that claim as low as we possibly can. We're not gonna come out and pay. But what you're doing is you're protecting yourself. And you're saying, insurance company, you're taking this risk for me. Because if somebody happens to sue me, I don't wanna have to worry about hiring an attorney, paying all those fees, taking time off from work to deal with it. The insurance company will do all that for you. So, again, it's well worth it.
Let me tie a couple of things we talked about into the real estate world for a second. And I wanna kind of point a few things. First of all, I've been doing it for 10 years, been working with investors for 8 years, extensively. First time, we talked about it a week ago, first time one of my investors called me, exactly 2 weeks ago, said his house, one of my investors who was actually buying in the process of buying a property with me in one of the markets, called me about a property he bought in Colorado, not through me, not with my teams, and the house burned down. First time I have a real story, a terrible story to share. And he said, and we talked for an hour plus, what can he do? The first thing he said, his coverage was how much it cost him to buy the property, not the replacement. First mistake he did, and I think some of you have actually got emails from me immediately, so we can all learn, my investors immediately got an email about it, so we can all learn from that mistake, is that his insurance was about, I want to say, 2/3 of what it's going to be the replacement cost, okay? He's still investigating a couple of things. So make sure, go home, don't go to bed, no, just go to bed. Tomorrow morning, if you have rental properties, look at how much the coverage is, and don't think of, if you just think you can walk away from it because it was burned down, that's not necessarily the case. There's still a property, it may be condemned, it may be vandalized afterwards, there are so many other things that can happen to a burned property. Realistically, it's the first time, I'm talking about well over 1,000 properties over the years, first time I hear that kind of a story, but it's there. So the homework you should be doing is make sure you have enough coverage. Second thing, I suggest for everyone in this room, being real estate investors, kind of tying it a little bit to asset protection in quotation. Keep your insurance information secret. It's nobody's business. The reason I'm saying it, because if your property manager knows you have good coverage in a $5 million umbrella, and there's some issue, guess what's going to happen? You're sitting, you're sitting duck for that matter. So I'm not saying, basically, keep it to yourself. You don't need to share the insurance coverage and information. Am I right? As an asset protection.
Actually, we don't want you to.
Yeah, I know you guys don't want us to, but you guys should say, no, it's between me, my spouse, and that's it, and my insurance agent, not something that I should kind of talk about with other people, so that means they know, oh, he's got insurance, we can go after him.
Right.
Exactly, it's the same thing I've done. I have a small apartment building in Oklahoma. I'm not there, I'm not the one managing it. I don't know who's doing the turnovers or anything else. They don't know that I carry workman's comp on it. I didn't tell them.
Yeah.
But I'm still covering myself against the what-ifs, but also not encouraging claims.
Right, exactly, exactly, that's the point. Chuck?
What if they want to be an additional insured, and they want to see the deck page to show them that they are?
If you need to do it. I'm not saying, always hide it, and always don't say,